Hello, and welcome to today's lesson where we're going to work through the law of cosines to find missing angles or missing side lengths. Now, when we're dealing with the law of cosines, what this means is we don't have a right triangle and we don't have enough information to use law of sines. Okay, those are the first two things you want to look for. Law of cosines is basically your last resort. It's the most involved, okay, and works through overall. Now, in a lot of our homework problems, we've seen this splash in almost every unit we have, is we've used the Pythagorean Theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, now, that is limited to right triangles. So what if we wanted to use a similar type of formula to work with an acute or an obtuse triangle? And we can actually do that. What we have to understand is there has to be a cosine adjustment to it to be able to find that piece and make the formula work correctly. Okay, so that's where the law of cosines comes about. Okay, it comes from the idea of using the Pythagorean theorem and having to involve an adjustment to make that value work correctly. Okay, if you want to see more about that, we've got a YouTube here where it goes into a deeper investigation of the law of cosines. What we're going to look at here is just the application of the law of cosines. Okay, now, the important part about the law of cosines, and this is why the law of sines does not work. Okay, law of sines, I've got an angle paired up with a side that I want to find. Now, if I had either of these two angles, if I had angle A or angle B, I could find the answer for C by using law of sines, cross multiply and solve. But in this case, I don't have A or B, so I'm going to have to use the law of cosines. So now, the important part in this situation is these two pieces are paired. The C has to be left by itself on the left. Okay, so that missing piece or the side across from the angle that you're working with. And then what we have to have is we have to have the cosine of 36 tagged on to the opposite side. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have those two separated properly. The rest of the information can actually be plugged in basically any order. So we've got the first side that we know, 52 squared, plus the next side that we know, 45 squared. Okay, notice that these two side lengths work together to create the 36-degree angle. Okay, so that's what you want to think about here is when you're using the law of cosines, make sure that the two side lengths that you're listed on the right-hand side of your equation matches and creates the angle that you're listing. And then we finish this up by our adjustment, minus 2, and then we need both of these lengths, 52 and 45. Okay, now, to be able to go through and finish this work, what we have to do is find all of these values. 52 squared, 2704, plus 45 squared, 2025, and I'm just going through that in this situation to make sure that you can check your answers and see that your values are working correctly. So then we've got 2 times 52 times 45, and we've got 4680. So minus 4680 times the cosine of 36. And now we can really kind of finish this out. So I just wanted you to be able to see some of those values. So I just didn't want to give you just one single answer. So now we put those pieces together. 2704 plus 2025 minus 4680 times the cosine of 36. Okay, and I get an answer of c squared equals 942.8. And then to get c by itself, we have to square root both sides. Okay, so that is our last step. Square root of c squared is c, and then the square root of 942.8 is 30.7 centimeters. Okay, so that was a quick walkthrough of the law of cosines. The most important pieces, once again, are making sure that your single value is matched with the angle across from it when you're building the equation. So let's look at this one more time. In this case, we're not using A, B, or C at all. We're just using angles and sides. Okay, so here are my pair of values. So I know that when I'm building my equation, I'm going to have x squared by itself. Okay, I'm going to finish my equation with the cosine of 82. Okay, so I have those two pieces placed, and then I want to go through and place everything else. Okay, 235 squared plus 282 squared minus 2 times 235 times 282. Okay, so you just want to be careful that you're using on the right-hand side the two lengths that make your 82-degree angle. Okay, those are the ones that we both square and then put in their singular form with that cosine adjustment for this equation. Okay, so I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker. 235 squared plus 282 squared minus 2 times 235 times 282 times the cosine of 82. Okay, so I'm typing this in all in one long string. Okay, get a fairly large answer here. 116,302.99. So I'll just run it out here 3 decimal places so I don't have to change that value. And then to get x by itself, okay, we square root that answer and we get 341.0. And our units are centimeters. Okay, now the last thing that you could do with the law of cosines is actually find an angle. So in this case, we want to find the angle Q. It's paired with the 225 centimeters. Now, if you notice here, you can rewrite or rebuild the equation. Okay, I'm not a big fan of that because it's just one more thing that you have to remember. And if you can build the law of cosines as is, you don't have to memorize another formula. You just have to go through your algebraic solving steps. So let's set up our equation here. We have 225 squared equals, and remember on the other side we're going to have our cosine of Q, and then we're going to plug in the rest of our pieces. What are the two lengths that make up angle Q? I've got 175, I can square that, plus 250, square that, and then we've got the minus 2 times 175 times 250. Okay, so now I've built my formula. And then what we want to do is we want to go through and simplify all of our values. 225 squared. You know, some of these numbers are going to be a little bit big here just based on the fact that we're using some larger base values. So 50,625 equals 175 squared, 3625 plus 250 squared, 62,500, minus, okay, we've got 2 times 175 times 250, okay, 87,500 cosine of q. Okay, so now I've simplified all of my values, and now it just becomes a solving situation. I want to subtract 30,625 from both sides. I want to subtract 62,500 from both sides. Okay, and once I've done that, 50,625 minus 30,625 minus 62,500, okay, we get negative 42,500. The fact that it's a negative value, that's not something that is cause for alarm mathematically, because if you notice, we have a negative on the other side. Okay, cosine of q. Okay, now this is a multiplication, so we have to finish with the division on both sides. So we're dividing by 87,500. Okay, and they're both negative, so this is going to give me a positive answer here. Divided by 87,500, I get 0.4857 equals the cosine of q. Okay, and then remember back to some of our earlier units. How do we get q by itself? Okay, we want to think about the idea of dividing by cosine. Okay, we can't technically divide by cosine, so we use the cosine -1 or the inverse cosine to do that process for us. And if we do the inverse cosine of that value, we get an angle measure of 60.94 degrees for angle Q, and we can round that however we would like. Okay, one more example, just solving for t, same steps here, so if you feel like you're good with the process, definitely jump into the assignment, but I'm going to run through just one more example, looking at it from a different perspective. Okay, so now, once again, find your angle and side pair. Okay, that's important for our initial setup. So we have 36 squared equals, and we have the cosine of t on the other side. Okay, now, the two sides that make up angle t, the 41 and the 25, are the values I use to fill in the other spots. So we've got 41 squared plus 25 squared minus 2 times 41 times 25 times cosine of t. Okay, so we have all of our pieces there. Okay, now in this one, like I've done before, I'm going to move through in a little bit faster fashion. There we go. I got that to jump for us. So if we have 36 squared minus 41 squared minus 25 squared, okay, I get negative 1,010 on the left-hand side. Now on the right-hand side, I need to multiply my 2 times 41 times 25. Okay, that 2050 negative has to stay with the cosine of t right now. Okay, it has to stay there until I divide it out. Okay, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2050 now. And I get the cosine of t equals 1010 divided by 2050 equals 0.4927 rounded to 4 decimal places. Okay, and remember, whenever we're using trig functions, we want to go with as many decimal places as possible. 4 is a really good number to work with to make sure our answers are correct. Okay, finishing up, we want to divide by cosine, and we finish our process by using the inverse cosine to finish that up for us. So we've got inverse cosine of 0.4927, and we get 60.5 rounded to 1 decimal place for the measure of angle T. Okay, and that concludes our lesson, the law of cosines, and using the law of cosines to solve for both side lengths and angle measures. Thank you, and have a good day.